Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm here with a reaction to Newcastle United's victory over Wolverhampton Wanderers at St James's Park yesterday. What a performance it was. It was really, really good to see the evolution of the team in a tactical sense from Eddie Howe's tweak, the way that they managed to control the game. They were much more solid in midfield. They looked like they were back to their best in terms of confidence and togetherness. Everything that I sort of said in the build up to this game that needed to be there, it was there. Joe Willock obviously made a huge, huge difference starting again for the second time in a week. I was a bit concerned about that, but he came through it fine. Isak as well, another game under his belt with a goal, his 11th in the Premier League this season, which was absolutely superb. But before we get into any of that, I really want to touch on Bruno Guimaraes because I think he's not obviously not in the thumbnail in the title, but he was absolutely phenomenal in his own way. I think his game was summed up by the lung-busting run that he made for the first goal, which started as a real counter attack that he actually kicked off from a corner, I think it was. They broke at pace through Anthony Gordon. Isak's already up there, but Bruno makes a lung-busting run to get into the box that really makes the goal happen because he gets the ball fed to him from Gordon, crosses it over, the cross is deflected into Isak's path, and then that's 1-0. And obviously in the second half, that viral pass that he made that was no look, a little Maradona turn, and then a no look pass to Miggy Almiron in the second half, just phenomenal. And I was speaking to somebody last night, a friend of mine last night, we were actually discussing world-class players, first in the Premier League and then worldwide, and I think we only came up with about 30 names, of which Bruno was one. Most of them are in the Premier League. I think we came up with about 20 of them were in the Premier League, but Bruno was one, and he is absolutely phenomenal. And you can see why the big clubs will be after him in the summer. It will be very difficult to keep him, but you also understand why Newcastle simply have to keep him because he's just absolutely brilliant. He is the heartbeat of the team in many ways. Is the reason why Newcastle have never won without him. And yeah, it was just one of those really, really good performances from him. Another one just really typified everything good about Newcastle alongside Willock, who we'll come on to him now. I think he was the definitive reason why Newcastle were back to looking strong again. I've said it so many times on this channel about the lack of intensity, the energy and power that they have when they don't have Joelinton and Willock in midfield, and how that's left them open and exposed. They looked much more powerful going forward, as I've mentioned with Willock, but also the Eddie Howe tweak that came in midfield. They were much deeper. It was like they approached the game like they did at Aston Villa to nullify Wolves, make Wolves have a bit more of the ball, which Gary O'Neill denied after the game. He said that that wasn't the case, but it absolutely was tactical from a Newcastle perspective to allow Wolves to have the ball, to nullify their main strength, which is on the counter-attack. And then there was a brilliant thing that I noticed from Willock. I was working on the BBC Sport website on the Championship yesterday, so I only had an eye on what was going on at St James's before I watched it back. And the thing that I noticed, though, in the first half was Willock, one, demanding movement and more energy in attack when he had the ball on the left, and two, constantly being back there to defend it with Burn and back Burn up, which really nullified the space for Pedro Neto. There was one run that Neto made where he got past Burn and Botman, but Cher made a tackle. From then, Neto was barely an issue before he came off with an apparent Achilles injury. So it was a big plus for Newcastle to keep him quiet when Hwang wasn't there already and Cunha wasn't there. And Wolves really lacked any sort of potency in attack. They were good on the ball. I think they played some nice stuff. I think they're a good side, and Gary O'Neill deserves massive credit. But the way that they were so nullified in attack was partly down to lack of options that they had, but also Neto being there was a massive worry for Newcastle coming into the game. I mentioned it in my preview, but he was absolutely nullified brilliantly, and I think that was mainly to do with Willock, and he just gives such a different dynamic to Newcastle. Yes, they were defensively disciplined in their position in midfield, and there was less space between the lines, which was finally the change that Eddie Howe hasn't made in recent weeks. We've seen Ross Barkley make that space his own a couple of times. We've seen Morgan Gibbs-White do it in recent weeks. We've seen Bournemouth players do it. We've seen Arsenal did it last week with Havertz as well. That's been a massive Achilles heel for Newcastle. It was finally solved yesterday, and you could see that gained the confidence and the togetherness and everything. I think the big thing for me coming into this game, I said it on the True Faith podcast and in the preview of this game on my video, that I wanted to see Newcastle look like like they trusted each other and look like they were confident and look like they had a plan again. And that was all on show yesterday. They were absolutely brilliant in that sense. Looked like the best of both worlds for Newcastle because they had Willock in midfield and Murphy's pace and Isak up front and Gordon on the other side. They could break as effectively as they break anyway, but they were just more selective with their pressing, and they had that little bit more solidity and security in midfield, and that really paid off. I think it was brilliant to see Almiron come on and from the bench make another positive impact after I think he was really good in midweek at Blackburn. I think he was again impressive yesterday when he came on. But it's just, I think it really told that Newcastle had some options on the bench. They were able to bring Louis Miley on the pitch in the second half to continue the same approach to the game rather than change it. They didn't need to change anything because they had full control of it by the time that Miley comes on. And I think the issue with having Miley and Longstaff on the pitch at the same time is, as good as they are at what they do, they're very similar in terms of they're great at positional play. They're great at passing and keeping things ticking over. I think Miley's actually got a better passing range than Longstaff, but they both bring very similar sort of things to the team. Whereas that was kind of needed, I think, in the second half before the Livramento scored the third goal. To wrap it up, I think in the second half there was a possibility that Wolves might have struck back, but as I say, they struggled with potency. But if they got one goal, the game could have changed. And Miley coming on really helped solidify things in that midfield. That was a huge moment. As I say, it's great to see Isak and Willock come through the game again unscathed going into Chelsea next week. The one negative on the injury front is Kieran Trippier, who came off in the second half, replaced by Tino Livramento, who obviously went on and scored his first goal for the club at the end of the game. So there's very little to be upset about from yesterday. It was a very good performance. It was a really it was a game, as I say, that made it clear that Newcastle are still on the right track in the broadest sense. It's been a difficult season for various different reasons, but they're still on a good wavelength. They're still in a place where they can succeed. They still have an identity. It's taken a bit of time, and Joe Willock's recovery to find it again, and I think that's quite telling. It's also not the same without Joe Linton, and I think that's really crucial that they sort his contract out in the summer. I think that all this talk about maybe allowing him to leave, allowing Bruno to leave, it's very easy to say that in terms of, oh yeah, FFP or PSR, or it'll allow Newcastle to do more in the transfer window. But if you lose players like that, you lose an identity that's become absolutely crucial to the way Newcastle play under Eddie Howe. I think that's more important than bringing new players in. I think keeping the existing core, building from that, is absolutely crucial. Can't let Joe Linton leave. Can't hopefully let Bruno leave either, because Bruno, it wasn't one of his dominant games in the same way that Forrest was, where he picked it up by the scruff of the neck, but he was just there making crucial touches, crucial little moments, dictating the pace away from the cameras in a way. It was very good from him to see that he can play in that sort of conductor's role in these games when he isn't stepping up, and he doesn't need to be the hero like he was at Forest, for example. I praised him in that game. It wasn't one of those, but there was still 2 or 3 absolutely magical moments from him. But I think this game belongs to Joe Willock. He's the reason why Newcastle was so much more effective. They were able to, as I say, to balance the sort of the deeper line midfield and the Aston Villa setup, the not allowing the space between the lines, but then also being able to break at pace. And they were helped by an open Wolves defence. That's true. But yeah, this was a really good performance from a team that had its identity, had its confidence, had its verve back. And obviously Alexander Isak up front makes a massive difference as well. Him and Willock back in the team together, they've got such a good relationship off the pitch as well as on it. But they're so crucial to the way that Newcastle play. As I've said, Eddie Howe talks about an identity, but these individual players really make the difference, and that was one of those examples with Willock, particularly Bruno and Isak as well. They're the ones who get my standout of approval today. Newcastle are up to 8th, still in the race for Europe, and now everything's looking a little bit rosier. Thank you very much for joining me. I'll be back next week at some stage. If you like this sort of thing, please like, share and subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.